I think I wasn't the only one shocked by the video appeal of 6 Democratic members of Congress to the United States military. They urged them not to follow, as they said, illegal orders from the president without explaining what he had done, might do, or was planning to do illegally. In other words, which orders to follow and which not to. They suggested that soldiers and sergeants decide for themselves what is legal and what is not. The CIA claims that this is only the beginning of the operation that the Democrats are preparing. That is, as they say, the CIA says that something will definitely happen next. I don't know if they know or not, but they say it will definitely happen. I
spoke with 2 CIA officers who said this is part of a big deception and that they're trying to get the country here used to preparing for something bad. That is about to happen because of Donald Trump. This is straight out of the CIA playbook. It's a destabilization operation where they make people not trust each other. And you're doing this because she's an analyst, and as an analyst, she would definitely know which propaganda operations were successful and which ones failed, so she knows exactly what works. So in the first part of the video, you assert authority. I'm from the CIA, I'm military. You should trust us. In the second part of the video, they present a threat, and it's not external, but an internal threat. Donald Trump. And then at the end, they offer a solution. What is the solution? Resist. You say no, but they don't give you a choice. They say it's your duty. She's being controlled because she didn't come up with it herself. She's Brennan's minion. And usually congressmen and senators don't do anything together. They actually tend to dislike each other. To organize this, she must have had a handler who told her what to do. And it was risky because nothing like this had ever been done in the country's history. And you can see it even from the fact that the mainstream media were skeptical and couldn't answer the question. So they weren't even let in on the operation. You can see how they're stumbling and getting confused. And I'm glad that the American military is now investigating this guy, Kelly. That's what we expect from Donald Trump 2.0. The deep state cannot interfere in the affairs of a legitimately elected president and get away with it. We must set an example by punishing those responsible.
That is based on the methodology developed by the CIA for operations in other countries. This speech, which supposedly didn't call for anything, does not carry out illegal orders. Okay, it is part of a psychological pressure operation on the country.
Fortunately, the Trump administration is taking this situation incredibly seriously, including the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth.
I agree with Secretary of Defense Hegseth. Mark Kelly should be recalled immediately and court-martialed. Why don't we do that with more people like him? What do you think?
Any military person knows that if you accept a pension, you're bound by the provisions of the Uniform Code of Military Justice. You learn that on your very first day in the Army. You find out as soon as you sign the papers. By the way, they teach you this when you take the Uniform Code of Military Justice course. Everybody knows it, so it's very straightforward. If you took money and he took money, that means he's subject to the Uniform Code of Military Justice, and as such, he can be an antonym. He is called to active duty for a court-martial for violating the Uniform Code of Military Justice. And looking at something like this, I would say that you need to set an example. You need to set an example. Do we have standards or not? They just closed the Colma case and Letitia James's case. We know they're appealing, but we need to play tough. Because if we don't, they'll keep doing it. They'll keep undermining the president, and I've said this more than once. What they're doing is an attempt to organize the next impeachment, just like they organized the first impeachment with whistleblowers and leaks from the intelligence community. Remember Vindman, remember Charo Mello? That's what they're trying to do. This is aiding and abetting a crime. If you're leaking classified information. But they don't care because they want any confidential information about President Trump or Secretary Hegseth to be leaked to them. So they can start a new impeachment if they get the chance. If they win back the House of Representatives in 2026.
That is, as they claim, there is a plan that has been tested, as I already said, in other countries. Not just tested, but worked out in other countries, and now it's being transferred to the United States. what exactly is forbidden to the CIA itself. But it's quite possible that it's not the CIA as an organization, but rather, so to speak, people who worked in the CIA during the times of, let's say, Obama and Biden. Now they've left, so to speak, and on someone's money, well, let's say, they continue to use their skills. Well, excuse me if they're telling us not to follow Trump's illegal orders under any circumstances. That means he either already gave or is planning to give some illegal orders. But
You know what's even worse? Take a look at this. Now, since yesterday, we've also been seeing billboards popping up all over the country. Here's one in North Carolina, right outside Fort Bragg, urging service members to disobey their command. And now, can you guess who's financially connected, to put it mildly, with these billboards? Yes, George Soros. But now, friends, Stephen Miller spoke out about this whole situation, and I want all of you to listen to what he said, because, believe me, he's a bit fired up right now.
Mr. Miller, what should happen to the rebellious six? Well, they should be held accountable under the law and the military code of justice for a rebellious conspiracy against the United States. That's absolutely obvious and straightforward. What's the motivation? Why? 6 members of Congress who specifically selected people with CIA or military experience recorded a carefully written, meticulously produced, skillfully edited video addressing directly the members of our intelligence agencies and our armed forces, telling them not to obey orders from their superiors, telling them to decide for themselves whether an order is legal or not, and not to carry it out for people who hold power, to decide matters of life and death. The CIA is involved in secret missions all over the world where life and death are at stake. The armed forces carry out deadly operations again and again. They carry weapons, they operate drones, they control missiles, they work on nuclear submarines. For what purpose are you delivering this message at all? As you said, it's to create a color revolution. It's a CIA manual to try to spark a rebellion from within the army and from within the CIA. Listen, we've seen this. When Charlie Kirk killed Jesse, members of the armed forces openly celebrated his murder. So think about that for a second. You have people in the armed forces, and it might be just a tiny percentage, but who celebrated the murder of Charlie Kirk. And now they're getting messages from Kelly and from other members of Congress saying, don't obey your commanders, rise up and challenge your superiors. Such language will get people killed. It threatens our national security. It's dangerous. It radicalizes, and it has all the signs of intent and purpose. And when they go on television and say, well, we can't say which order is illegal, that proves the point. It was never about the law, but about breaking the chain of command. The Democratic Party openly tries to destroy democracy every day. Whether it's judges tying the president's hands with illegal orders, releasing dangerous criminals onto the streets, or trying to secure and protect the illegal invasion of America by illegals. Now, inciting insurrection within our armed forces.
Ladies and gentlemen, this situation is completely transparent.
Absolutely clear. This is another
Extremely
leftist operation by the deep state to overthrow President Trump.
I'm just afraid that they've miscalculated again. By the way, at the same time, rumors started spreading that Trump was changing his entire cabinet. That he's become blue, sweet, and that even people close to him think he should be replaced by someone younger and more energetic. Moreover, it's the very same publications that used to claim Biden was absolutely in control, 100% on top of things, that are now doing this. And honestly, when he's on camera, he behaves terribly, but as soon as the camera turns off, he becomes young, lively, smart, and a very knowledgeable person. In politics, you always have to pay attention when something big is happening, when something starts to unfold. Usually, they try to distract our attention from the left side so we don't notice the right, or from the right so we don't notice the left. So what's happening right now? And now a report has been published by the Congressional Committee about Biden's health during his last year of presidency, when the Democratic Party nominated him for a second term. You remember, right, that he was nominated for a second term? So he didn't know which way to go, left or right, but he could easily lead the country on the international stage. And after the Democrats lost, suddenly Biden supposedly signed 8,000 pardons and dozens, if not hundreds, of executive orders. We might not even know about all of them yet. You
Get straight to the point very quickly, right? His closest circle, Joe Biden's circle, hid from the country the fact that he was in a state of mental decline and was so incapable of performing his job on a daily basis. The chief of staff, likely the White House's most important person, is always seen next to Donald Trump during press conferences and signings. Will Sharfwell, near attendant, appointed by Joe Biden, hadn't seen him for 6 to 8 weeks. She didn't know if he had approved the papers that were coming to her. He was a president in decline, an absentee, and his inner circle was deceiving the American people. That's what the report says. So what? The man next to me on screen, Jim Jordan, is releasing big documents today in another investigation. What do we know now? We know the FBI's memorandum used to start Operation Arctic Freeze, which targeted 160 Republicans, 92 conservative groups, 8 senators, a House member, the president, and the vice president, was actually flawed. According to FBI rules, the memo that initiated Arctic Freeze uses words like alleged evidence. It doesn't contain any actual grounds. And it considers crimes that, according to them, were committed by providing alternative or fake electors, or as they put it here, fraudulent electors. The memorandum does not address the fact that in 2 previous cases in American history, similar fake, fraudulent, or alternative electors were presented in South Carolina in 1976 and in Hawaii in 1960. There was no prosecution, and the FBI memorandum doesn't mention it. Well, a bombshell from Jim Jordan and James Comar today.
That was John Solomon, and as I've told you before, he's one of the best, if not the best, investigative journalists in the United States. And next to him in the frame, you saw Jordan, that is Jim Jordan, the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee.
First of all, regarding auto-pinning, as you, Sean, and John said, the whole country knew that Joe Biden couldn't handle it, and we saw it firsthand at the debates in the summer of 2024. Well, I always remember how Joe Biden said he had an 8 handicap and President Trump, yeah, you're joking, I saw you waving. We knew he couldn't handle it after those debates, and then everything he did after that, that's the problem. Joe Biden responded, yeah, well, we had a well-established process. As John explained and the report notes, there was no procedure to evaluate these decisions, whether pardons, commutations, executive orders, or other presidential actions. Thanks to Jack Smith, we learned it was much broader and larger in scale than we thought before. And remember, this is the same Jack Smith who imposed a gag order on President Trump and searched his house. This is the same Jack Smith whose 2 deputies took the Fifth Amendment 71 and 73 times before our committee. This is the same Jack Smith who spied on 8 United States senators, as we discovered. That's why we want Jack Smith to appear before the committee to testify after we receive the documents and to ask him the same questions we asked his deputies who invoked the Fifth Amendment. It's a simple question. This was a political operation that you conducted against President Trump. I invoked my Fifth Amendment right. How many other members of Congress did you spy on? I invoked my Fifth Amendment right. We want to ask Jack Smith these questions and see what answers we get from the guy who ran this gym.
Jordan, you claim that these pardons and commutations, about 44,000 of them, should be annulled, including those involving Biden's own family. And you believe there was some improper collusion between the January 6th committee, Benny Thompson, Liz Cheney, and Jack Smith, which was inappropriate and possibly illegal.
I don't know about that. That's all for the Attorney General and the Department of Justice to decide. The January 6th committee released 16 transcripts they just handed over. So that Jack Smith wouldn't have to get a search warrant to obtain such evidence. They just handed them over. So I know that happened, and we'll leave it to justice. And Joe Biden said that there was a process, certain protocols they had to follow before autopin was triggered. But
what you're describing is an unreasonable search and seizure.
Look, we publish transcripts sometimes. We don't just hand over the entire investigation to the Department of Justice. So again, I'll leave that to the Department of Justice. What I know is that all sorts of unusual things were happening there. And of course, just how extensive did this investigation turn out to be? And as for pardons and autographs, again, I'll leave that to the Department of Justice. We know there was no process, and we know that President Biden, I don't like to say this, but it's true, just couldn't handle the task, and the whole country saw it during those debates.
Simultaneously, several investigations reached the Attorney General. Biden is incompetent and couldn't assess what was being put in front of him to sign, but they didn't even put it in front of him. They just signed it using an auto pen. Cases are also being uncovered about surveillance of senators, Republican organizations, public figures, and the forgeries that were carried out with judges.
All three of us were up to our ears with Russia, Russia, Russia. We were all up to our ears in the first impeachment, the second impeachment, the use of the Justice Department for political purposes, and so on and so on. John Solomon, how do you interpret these findings? And the most common question I get asked is, you find all this information, but nothing happens. Now, things are starting to happen that didn't before.
To ensure that we ensure we can't ensure them about that. We can't ensure. Boring WEOM. So what do you think? Do they help? I think that's exactly how it'll end. Another thing is Russia, Russia, Russia.
You see, at first glance, signs that they abused their power and spied on people without the proper warrant.
Sean, we'll let the Department of Justice decide that. We do know that we handed over the case of John Brennan because that's part of the whole story. Some people call it a conspiracy because he misled us and wasn't honest. I believe he lied to Congress, so we also sent a letter to the Department of Justice recommending action on the Brennan case. This is all part of a wider campaign against the president and your political opponents.
The scandal has grown and has already reached the Clintons and Obama, and the Democratic Party has to come up with something to shift the country's attention from their crimes to, well, let's say, new scandals involving Trump. He's lost his mind, he's senile, yes. They brought out 6 members of Congress urging not to obey the orders of the commander-in-chief. Plus, they brought up Trump's supposed aging and loss of energy. Plus, they brought up alleged infighting within the administration, and who knows what else they have up their sleeve in reserve. Here's something else they're trying, by the way, to hush up, to cover up, to keep us from paying attention to.
Well, today, many people in this city are worried tonight. This is the great revelation that John Redcliffe promised, and there will be even more. The important thing here, Sean, is that it confirms what we already knew and gives us what we didn't know yet. We always knew, well, not always, but we knew before. In July 2016, Brennan reported to Obama that Hillary Clinton was planning to create a scandal about Trump colluding with Russia. To distract from her own email scandal, he reported this to the president, and then months later played a key role by overruling CIA analysts' opinions to include the Steele dossier. We also know that Clinton's team lied to the media, denied funding the Steele dossier, and essentially hid this funding as legal expenses. Mark Elias, then chief legal counsel for Clinton's team. And all of this required a collective effort from the government, the company, and the media. That's why, when you see the reaction in the media today, it's clear that whatever is produced, you can. You can show a dozen heads in a sports bag, and they still won't be impressed. And the reason is that for most of the media, it's not coverage, it would be an admission. That is, if they actually cover this story, they admit their role in what might be the greatest political setup in history. Well, tonight there are a lot of concerned people in this city. This is the great revelation that John Redcliffe promised, and there will be more. The important thing here, Sean, is that it confirms what we already knew and gives us what we didn't know. We knew before, though not always. In July 2016, Brennan reported to Obama that Hillary Clinton was planning to create a scandal about Trump's collusion with Russia to distract attention from her email scandal. He informed the president about this, and then, months later, played a key role in overruling CIA analysts' decisions when including the Steele dossier. We also know that Clinton's campaign lied to the media, denied that they funded the Steele dossier, and moreover concealed this funding as legal expenses.
Remember Adam Schiff? Adam Schiff, he was back then in Congress. Now, for his merits, he was made elected as a senator from California. So Schiff, he really is rub.
This is clear evidence of the campaign's intention to collude with the Russians. He could become the first president in a long time to face a real prison sentence. The Russians offered help, the campaign accepted the help, the Russians provided the help, and the president took full advantage of it. The evidence is now irrefutable and clear.
He reports, almost testifies about the evidence linking Donald Trump to Russia, HM. By the way, recently released FBI memos obtained by Fox News show a Democrat informant accusing Adam Schiff of authorizing the leak of classified information to harm Trump during the Russiagate investigation. At the meeting, Schiff stated that the group would leak classified information that discredited the President of the United States, Donald John Trump. Schiff stated that the information would be used to bring charges against President Trump. Someone said that this would be illegal, and upon hearing his concerns, an unnamed participant at the meeting assured him that they wouldn't get caught.
Leaking classified information
There hasn't been a president like Trump in this house for a long time, maybe ever. He can be compared to a rock that cannot be moved. Maybe there's a storm raging inside him, but on the outside, his facade is calm, steady, and absolutely stone-like.
I think usually they believe they can get away with those kinds of comments until they run into a guy named President Donald Trump who sued and won money from George Stephanopoulos, YouTube, Twitter. How many more companies should I list where he won lawsuits? They're targeting the British Broadcasting Corporation, not realizing they're challenging someone likely to hold them accountable. And Mark Kelly, obviously thanks to him for his service, wrote a long tweet today. Obviously, he's writing a tweet in response to say, here's my resume, excuse my words, don't touch me, I'm an important patriot, I love America. And Kix said, no, you've already crossed the line with your comments, just read history, what happens in such cases. They crossed the line, and I doubt this administration will ignore it.
And so, friends, just a little spoiler, that's not the case. We already have confirmation that the FBI will question all 6 members of the Rebel Six, and we also already know that Mark Kelly potentially faces charges under the Uniform Code of Military Justice. But the situation is actually getting even more serious. Right now, the Trump administration is also trying to find out who wrote, filmed, and edited the controversial Rebel Six video. But more importantly, who paid for it? Because let me tell you, that video didn't just appear out of nowhere. So, ladies and gentlemen, here's the real question. Who exactly is pulling the strings here? Because let me tell you this, the answer to this question is absolutely essential if we want America to be first.
Even the Democrats, well, the ones who are still normal, although saying normal Democrat is like saying friendly Cobra, well, something like that. They are stunned by what their fellow party members are doing.
You saw 6 Democrats, all with military and intelligence backgrounds, who said, listen, you don't have to follow orders. I don't know about that.
Here's the thing. In the armed forces, there's a rule that you only follow lawful orders. That's already written into their military contract. They know what that means and what they're agreeing to.
Who would think this is a court? That's what they're doing now, and now you're telling 21-year-olds on the United States ship Enterprise, you have to decide.
This is liberal political commentator Bill March. The clock is ticking. He describes Democrats as mad for telling troops to choose whether to obey based on feelings and politics. This is the kind of reckless posturing that happens when people who should know better decide that chaos is preferable to Trump. President again? Welcome to Nurk News. I'm Nurkish. And it seems like the Democrats still haven't learned that you can't play games with the military just because you lost power. Because every time they pull stunts like this, they show how little they respect basic discipline. You know, even Maher had to explain that. There he is, breaking the chain of command and upsetting liberals, arguing with Democrats on his panel who shared that crazy video.
Now, I understand what they mean because of the situation with Venezuela. But what do you think about telling people in the armed forces that they don't have to follow orders? Trump got furious and said George Washington would have hanged them.
And meanwhile, these congressmen are forced to turn to the Capitol Police, to the House Sergeant at Arms, because they're getting death threats, because they're afraid. And here is Senator Mark Kelly.
They're being threatened.
Those very members, Lisa Slotkin and Mark Kelly, who is married to Gabby Giffords. He gets death threats and knows it. So their thought was, don't abandon ship. You took an oath, don't abandon ship.
I understand. Talking to the military, you make your own choices, not just saying yes or no and following orders. A danger zone.
What about what we talk about in social studies class in 9th grade? All about rights and the Constitution of the United States.
It comes down to
Americans are undereducated. I believe public schools have a goal.
To make Americans dumb. And I don't just mean those who look like me. To make sure that the average working class American is dumb. The average soldier, so...
It's a conspiracy, yes.
I think so, because the average worker...
But you? Well, again, education is the Democrats' strong suit, yes.
I agree on either side.
Great, that didn't help America. You know, Macher explains what the Democrats always pretend not to understand. You know, those 6 lawmakers weren't defending democracy. They were covertly urging young soldiers to ignore Trump's orders. And now Dona Brazil is here crying about death threats, as if her side hasn't been fueling hostility for years. Tom Common hid his family from left-wing extremists. Immigration and customs enforcement agents face constant harassment. Trump survived 2 nearly fatal assassination attempts, and we know what happened to Charlie Kirk. The Democrats created this atmosphere, but they have the nerve to play the victims and pretend to be shocked by the mess they themselves caused.
I believe in this republic. I believe that even at just 250 years old, we have the best chance to become one of the greatest republics on earth. But we give away too much. And part of what we give away is our commitment to the Constitution of the United States and the understanding that this Constitution can change, it can be amended, it can evolve. The 13th Amendment should be changed, so slavery can't be justified, period. But I believe that soldiers are obligated to uphold the Constitution. If ordered to violate First Amendment protections as a soldier, you should say, absolutely not. And those who wear that stuff every day usually say yes, sir, and no, sir. I prefer our soldiers strictly follow the United States Constitution and reject unconstitutional orders.
Again, how do you ask? That is, I'm in the army. That's totally different. Sorry, you're asking children who probably know nothing about the Constitution to make this decision. But this needs to change. Bill Porra? Yes, I know, but it wasn't fixed. But now it is.
You know,
we have to do something, brother. We can't let the ignorant proletariat come to power. You know, the Democrats have run public schools for decades. They've gutted civics education, and they've left entire generations unable to explain the basics of constitutional authority. That's where the real danger lies. The elites are playing power games, while the working class they're supposedly protecting isn't even given the chance to understand what's legal and what's not. That reflects everything they do. From the 51 intelligence officials who push the fake story about Contour's laptop to the chaos they sow in the streets. When Democrats lose, they undermine institutions until they're useful to them. That's why they aim to make everything subjective and create doubt and confusion in the military.
I wish you would listen to the black guy on Bill Maher's show. He can't think one step ahead, not even half a step. Of course, it would be great if soldiers, sergeants, and officers could tell a lawful order from an unlawful one in a split second. Now, just to make it clear, let's imagine a scene. A guy and a girl are dragging a bag to the entrance of a crowded movie theater. There's a bomb in it. The officer orders the soldiers, shoot them immediately. The soldiers say, wait a second, we don't shoot civilians. The bomb is brought into the theater and 300 people die, but the soldiers, well, they're not required to follow an order to shoot civilians. So the devil, ladies and gentlemen, is in the details. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell. To send you our videos, we need to know where to send them. If possible, become a sponsor for just $1 for a month or more if you wish. And if you make a gift to the channel, there's a special section for that where you can donate, let's say, $200 or more, and we'll send you the documents. That's with tax. Thank you. So that's where we'll end for now, and I think we'll meet again very soon, because there is such an incredible amount of news that as soon as you finish one video, it just keeps coming and coming, and you want to make more and more. Goodbye.